Hi there, my name is Adiola Akintoye. I'm a leader and I've been in leadership now for over 25 years. Welcome to a monthly program called Leadership Conversation. This is a program where I'm going to be sitting down with leaders from across different sectors of life and of industry as well. They're going to be sharing with us their leadership journey, and they're also going to be inspiring us on how to become even more effective as a leader. For the purpose of this conversation, leader is someone who influence or have influence over others, either because of their role, because of what they do, or because of their character. And the purpose of the leadership conversation is to inspire emerging leaders and those who desire to improve and become effective as leaders. And it's also to stimulate thought-provoking insights on leadership, and also to share experiences of leadership, from different perspectives, the good, the not so good, and what we can learn from it. So I'm going to be sitting with leaders and I'll be asking them leadership questions. So join me every month for leadership conversation with Adiola. Hi there, everyone. My name is Adiola Akintoye, and today I am privileged to have a leadership conversation with David Verboom. David Verboom is one of my inspiring leaders, and actually, in my current role, he was the one that interviewed me and got me into that role. And I worked with him for about 6 months before he left the organization. David is a leader in humanitarian organizations in a career spanning over 25 years, including up to recently MEDE. MEDE is a humanitarian charity responding to humanitarian needs in many countries across Africa, Middle East, and Asia. David has led many projects and teams in some of the most challenging, insecure remote places, managing responses to conflict, natural disasters, and care of refugees. And this brings some interesting and inspiring perspective to leadership. So, David, thank you once again for taking the time to share your leadership insights with me and those who will be watching this conversation or listening to it sometime in the future. And for the purpose of this program, leadership for us is someone who has influence, and they exercise that influence in different ways. But the outcome of that influence is that it impacts people's thinking, way of life, or way of doing something, their behaviors. It changes somebody else. And so for the next 1 hour, 45 minutes or so, we are going to be having this amazing conversation on leadership from David Verboom's perspective. So, David, can you just share with us briefly your leadership journey and some of the interesting aspects of it?
Yeah, thanks, Adiola. Thank you for inviting me to this program. I'm very happy to participate and to share some of my views. Yeah, I think leadership, I think, everyone is a leader, isn't it? It starts when you're young, you're leader of yourself, and then slowly you're put into leadership of maybe your friends, or in my case, I started with sport. I started to become a leader in my football team, and then you slowly develop in your education, and then in organizations. And yeah, leadership has always been high on my agenda. I love to learn in it. I think you never finish learning on leadership. It's a process. And I think for me, what is so important is to start small, to start step by step. You know, the Bible talks about if you're faithful in the small things, then you're trusted with bigger things. And for me, that started as a small teenager, or even before as a child, you know, doing small chores at home, or, you know, doing things at the house. And then slowly you get more and more responsibility. But it's a growth, it's a process, and leadership has been part of my life from start, and I'm sure it will be till the finish.
Thank you so much. So if you were to look at the last 25 years, where would you see the key milestones or defining moments for you that's contributed to your leadership?
Yeah, I think I've been very blessed. So my background, as you explained a bit, I was a trained engineer, and then I'm from the Netherlands. So at that time, we had to go in the army. It was mandatory. So I went into the army and I learned a bit. I was privileged to be trained to lead a small group of soldiers. And we did, of course, this was all simulations, this was practices. But I get very excited, more and more excited about leadership. And then I started to study management at an MBA. And then I visited also my brother. He was working in Kenya. And so from one came the other, that I got involved in humanitarian leadership. Indeed, 25 years, well, 26 years ago, as you mentioned. And I think I love this model. I don't know if you know it, is from Jim Collins. It talks about level 5 leadership. And it talks about the same thing, that starting small. You know, you first become a capable individual, a team member. Then you learn and you grow and you become actually a contributing team member. So out of your individual strengths, your capacities, you grow. And I think it's a very biblical concept. You know, Jesus says, love the other as yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. So it starts by yourself, growing as a person in your character. Then you become, you know, a contributing team member. And then you can become, when you have the experience and the opportunities, you can become a competent manager. And then from a manager, you can grow into effective leadership. And then the ultimate goal, according to Jim Collins, I can talk a bit more about it, but you can become an executive, level 5 executive leadership. And I have had the privilege with organizations like MEDAIR, World Vision, ZOA, others, ECHO, a donor site, and implementing organizations to have opportunities to grow, to be thrown into the deep. Don't be afraid to be thrown into the deep, because it helps you to grow and to learn. I've made many mistakes, but looking back, I'm very thankful that I had people around me that gave me opportunities and coached me into those levels of leadership for my own development.
Thank you. You're talking about having many people around you. So can you share a person that has inspired you the most in your leadership journey, and why?
Yeah, so I've had many very good leaders around me. And I think you always kind of gravitate toward these kind of people. These are leaders that are not so much, and I call that servant leadership. A servant leader is someone that is not out there to impress others, how good he or she is. But a servant leader is there to have the people around him or her grow and develop themselves. That's really servant leadership. You're not in it for yourself, you're in it to help others, and to help, in that sense, the team, and in that sense, help the organization to grow. And I had those kind of leaders around me. And I think, one example was a leader I had working in Sri Lanka, time when there was a conflict, we had the tsunami, very difficult time. And I was started with a small team, but this leader gave me the opportunity to take up bigger responsibilities, to go out, to start projects. He gave me a budget. He gave me opportunities, contacts to develop, and this made me grow. And eventually, he even said, you have outpassed me, you've grown me, and I think that's again a servant leader. A servant leader is not threatened by actually the team members around him or her to become even better leaders than he or herself, and that's what I've been privileged to have the amazing examples around me that help me to grow.
Thank you. Wow. You mentioned earlier that, you've made mistakes in your leadership journey, and, you were privileged to have, leaders that gave you the opportunity. Can you share with us maybe one of those mistakes and what you learned from it and how that has defined your leadership now?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's many examples, and one maybe to mention is when MEDAIR is an organization that also gives you the opportunities to grow. So after having done short missions as a project manager or an officer and then manager, and then I became country director in South Sudan, and this was a huge program. I started in 1996, and I was kind of confident and proud almost of myself, what I was able to achieve and the span of control that I had. And like in many countries these days in the world, also there accidents happened, and so we had a team member that passed away, and this happened during my break. I was a person that wanted to have everything under control, to be in charge, to manage well, to take full responsibility. And they couldn't even reach me during the break. My wife and myself, we were out somewhere in a resort and no one could reach us. And so when we come back, I was shocked. And it really was, for me, shaking my foundations, and it made me realize, and I learned so much from it. Of course, it was not a mistake by myself that this happened, but my mindset had to change. And I learned very much and continue to learn this wonderful serenity prayer, that says, God gives me the wisdom to let go of the things that I cannot control. And this was an example. I couldn't control it. I had to let go. But then also the prayer goes on and says, God, give me the courage to make steps to things that I can control and that I can improve. And then thirdly, give me the serenity, give me the wisdom to know the difference between these two. And of course, this is something that you're learning your whole life. But at that moment, when I lost a team member that I was responsible for, I had to go back to God, question my own capacities. And slowly over the years, step by step, I have learned to, as a Christian, as a faith-based person, to trust God for guiding me and leading me, and to trusting Him for all the things that I cannot control, and to have the courage to do things that I can control and to step out and to do them.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful prayer for all leaders to be praying, knowing that, you can't control everything. No. So I know your faith is so important to you. It's basically the foundation of your leadership, and you've spoken about servant leadership and how that is your style. So I'm just interested, really, from your perspective, what is the difference between servant leadership and other leadership from your perspective, and where does your faith comes in? How that foundation embedded in your leadership?
Yeah, I think as a Christian, you choose to follow Jesus. And for me, Jesus is the prime example of a servant leader. We have this wonderful example just before his death, when he leaves this earth to go back to his Father. And when you read in John 13, it says he knew the time. So that's one thing as a leader. We need to follow Jesus. Jesus knew the time we live in. And as a leader, we need to be aware of the timing. We need to look around the context, what is happening in the world. And secondly, it says he knew where he came from and where he went to. So he was confident in his identity. And this is something that so many of us are struggling these days, isn't it? In the world, there's an identity crisis of individuals, of nations, of organizations everywhere. And that's the great thing. If we believe in God, God has created us, and that is our identity. He loves us as his children. And so Jesus knew his identity. And I think also as a leader, it's so important to know our identity. And then thirdly, it says he had all the power. And I think when we walk with God, God says, by prayer, we have his power, his help, his support. That's not power, to use for ourselves or our own agenda. No, that is the power because we are co-workers with him. And so we have access to that power. But the amazing thing, when this happened with Jesus in John 13, you would think, I would, as a person, I would say, okay, he's criticized. The church leaders at that day were kicking him out, even his own family. No one believed in him. And you have all that power, you know who you are. In his case, I would probably go to the square in Jerusalem and show everyone that, he was basically a Superman. But he didn't do that, isn't it? He went to the lowest of the lowest in that society. He started washing the feet of his teammates. And I think this is an ultimate example. And of course, it's not, it's throughout his life, we can see that Jesus was the real servant, serving others. And for me, that has been a massive inspiration to follow. And constantly, you learn and you grow. But this, for me, this model of servant leadership, serving your teammates, and then beyond that, people in need, is the model that I want to follow.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Looking at, being aware of the context, the understanding your identity, and the power of prayer and humility. In leadership, we always talk about vision, purpose, and value. How important are these three, given what you've just said, for a leader?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think there's a big difference between manager and leader. And I already talked about this model of Jim Collins, and of course you see it in many models. The difference, a manager, his or her focus will be to do the things right, to do them efficient. A leader has a vision. And so coming back to your question, vision is essential to be a leader. A vision means that you know what are the right things to do. So to give an example, for me in the humanitarian sector, we can have a wonderful clinic, or a water well, for people to get well. It's efficient, it's cost efficient, it's well managed. But if it's the wrong place, people cannot reach it, or it's in the wrong country, or it's done by, as an organization, it's something that as an organization, it's not right for you to do. You have the leader has made the wrong choices. So leadership is so much bigger because as a leader, you cast a vision for your team, for your organization, for your church. And a vision, the Bible says, without vision, people perish. isn't it?
Yeah.
If we don't have a vision, we tend to run around, sometimes like headless chickens. We need to know where we're going. And that's what a leader does. A leader also, to do that, you need to have a helicopter view. You need to step back and say, okay, we're all busy running around, but where are we actually going to? We may be climbing a ladder, but against what wall is that ladder? And so I think a leader, you talk about vision and purpose, is essential for a leader. That's what the leader is busy with. That's what wakes up the leader at night. And that's also why I believe, as a faith-based leader, it's so important to be connected to God, to know and to hear from God, and also the people around you, together, to then be thinking, okay, where are we going as an organization? Where are we going as a team? What is our unique purpose in life? And then it's the job of the leader to cast that vision, to put the dot on the horizon and say, guys, in 5 years, we want to be there. We want to be unique in this, or we want to reach those people. And I think there's so many examples in the Bible, but also around us. Nowadays, I think in this world, we often find leaders that are more jumping on what's happening. They're jumping on social media posts. They're jumping on the next elections. They are jumping on fear, but they don't have a long-term vision. They don't know where their country or their organization or their church or their team is going to. But it's so important as a leader to have that vision. And I think as a faith-based leader, that needs to come from God. You need to be inspired together, of course, with your team around you, discussing it, evolving and planning it. And then the leader casts the vision so that everyone can own it, can rally around it, and collectively you can move to that vision.
Thank you. As we were just talking, I was just reflecting on Moses as a leader. There's a view that God will give the vision to the leader, and then the leader has the responsibility to share the vision to the people. And that was how, Moses was the one that God says, I'm taking my people to the promised land. That's the vision, the promised land. And Moses had to continuously share the vision, remind the people about the vision and keep it in the forefront. And this is a key responsibility of the leader. Thank you so much. One aspect, I did my master's recently in leadership and development, and one of the things that we were challenged on at the beginning of the class was good and bad leaders. And the question is about whose definition of good, whose definition of bad. And so I would like to hear your own perspective about what is good, bad, or effective leaders. Which one, makes sense, or which one do you subscribe to?
Yeah. I very much believe in the model of situational leadership. And you can see, there are different theories on that, different books written about it. But basically, it talks about you have directive leadership. That's one line. It's a quadrant of 4 types of leadership depending on the context. So one can be low directive, another can be high directive, and the other is low supportive or high supportive. And so for me, as in an emergency situation, like what recently happened in Turkey and Syria and Medea, we sent teams there. You have to be directive. The same, in an army or in an emergency situation, the leader has to be directive. The context is such that you cannot start consulting. You have to be you have to be directive and give instructions and lead the team and go in front of that. So that's the highest directive behavior. And of course, you have less time of supporting. Then the second quadrant is more coaching. So you're more supporting, but still quite directive. And this could be, when you're training new disciples, like what Jesus was doing, coaching and supporting. Then on the more lower directive is when you have also people that you're leading that maybe have challenges or difficulties. Or, like in the Corona time, you had to have a lot of time to support people. We could often not give each other a hug or support each other. So you needed to spend more time when you could see each other, or otherwise through video. And then of course you're more supporting, and if it's even lower, you could also be more delegating and supporting people to perform and to grow. So situational leadership for me is very important, and so you don't need to apply always the same model. It depends on the context. Even if it's the same organization, you can be in different phases, you can be in different environments that you need to be adjusting to. But to come back on bad leaders, yeah, I think there are a variety of things when leaders are, I believe, could not do a good job is when they've, for example, given responsibility too quickly. I've been talking about being thrown in the deep with a coach and support. Like when you teach children to swim, it goes step by step. But when people don't have the security in themselves, they be given a big job and they start to act like a leader, but don't really have the integrity, then I think you often find challenges. And sadly, we see that around us in leadership positions. As I said already, you move from, maybe in my case, I moved from an engineer to a manager to a leader, but that doesn't necessarily need to apply for everyone. And it doesn't, I have friends who are very good engineers. An engineer and specialist knows a lot about a specific, a smaller area. A leader needs to know a little about many things. That's the difference. And it's no problem. Some people, I have friends who remain and continue to be an engineer. They love to be in a laboratorium and to stay there. They don't want to control. They don't want to manage people. They don't want all this ambiguity, all this complexity of leadership. They just want to be engineers. So if you put a good engineer in some engineering companies, the best engineers are made leaders, but they don't like it. They don't want it. And they're actually bad leaders because it doesn't fit them. They like to be in their corner, focusing on, developing a rocket or whatever they're developing. And that's what they're good in. And that's fine. And don't put them in leadership because it doesn't make them happy. And it doesn't make the people around him happy. So these are some examples where indeed, I think, not necessarily because of the person, but because of the circumstances, a leader can turn out not be doing not a good job.
So understanding the context and also self-awareness is also important for a leader.
Yeah.
Because if you are leading people and actually, you don't like it, that's not where your strength is. You'd rather just be the technical expert advising leaders, then it's better you stay in that lane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Self-awareness is very good. It's a very good word. It's so important. And you're tempted, isn't it? The leader maybe sometimes get a better salary, you get more exposure. But be self-aware of what you can and what you cannot do. And don't take up things that you're not ready for yet.
You mentioned ambiguity and complexity of leadership. I mean, leadership is not easy, it's not easy at all. Leading people is very challenging, and also having to make decisions, when you don't have all the information, or when life depends on you as well. It's so complex. And so my final question, unless of course, we want to continue, what would be, in addition to what you've said, or maybe, from what you've said as well, your top 3 advice to emerging leaders who desires to be effective in leadership. What would this be?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think the first one, to build on what we just talked about, is work on yourself, work on your character, be confident in yourself, know that God loves you, and have that secure base. And out of that secure base, you can then lead. Don't try to find a secure base in leadership. Don't try to use your leadership position for authority or appreciation. That doesn't work. Sooner or later, people will understand it and they will see straight through it. No. Be confident, be yourself. And then you can see how you develop, how you grow, how the people around you, how, God gives you the opportunity to step on. So that's the first thing. Work on yourself, and then you can develop. The second thing related to that, and again, I want to mention Jim Collins, this book, Good to Great. I didn't say, but he investigated 5,000 successful organizations, both profit and non-profit. And his result was that he said level 5 leadership is a very unique paradoxical mix of humility and strong professional will. And I think, again, you have this personal character, which is not about, it's servant leader, really. It's humility. And he uses a model that he kind of says, it's 3 circles that need to come together. And as young leaders, I would advise you to look it up. It's a combination of what is your passion is 1 circle. This could be a certain people group. You want maybe to work with children, or in my case, I wanted to work with people that were in humanitarian crisis. Then secondly, what is your capacity? What are the things you like doing? Things you do and you get recognition and you actually like doing it. So for me, it was managing, organizing things. But it can also be taking care of people. It can be finances. It can be anything. So that's the second circle. And then the third circle is also, it's related to that. Is what gives you resources? What gives you opportunities? And so if you put these 3 circles together, you get the sweet spot in the middle. And I would say to everyone, try to find your sweet spot. For me, it was people in need, management, and then getting the resources out of that, the growth out of that, the appreciation out of that. And then thirdly, I think, as I said at the start, start small. When you're faithful about small things, then God will put you in charge of bigger things. Don't look at the bigger things, they will come. Focus on being faithful to God, to your family, if you're married, to your wife, if you have a job, to your boss. Be faithful in the small things, and then God will put you in charge of bigger things.
Wow. Thank you so much, David, for imagining.
Thank you.
There, start small, be faithful in small things. Focus on being faithful in small things. Big things will come, and God will put you in charge of bigger things. What a way to
definitely
this conversation. Thank you so much, David. So much insights. I've been taking notes myself. I'm going to do my 3 circles as well. And see whether I'm in my sweet spot or outside of my sweet spot, and have a plan to get into my sweet spot. So thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation with David Verboom, and see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Adiola.